behalf of the Center, I welcome you and thank you for your interest. Grace Paley was a force of nature. Her reputation has only grown apace since her death in 2007, especially that of her literary reputation and her commitment to peace and justice. Her commitment to peace and justice continues to inspire all over the planet, literally. We at the Joiner Center were blessed for many years by her presence at many events, but especially during our annual Writers' Workshop held every summer. And there's information about that at the back of the room for those of you who might be interested. Well, her death left a certain void in our hearts. Thus, to keep her memory and legacy alive, we've instituted this annual reading in order to enable other women, always women, who embody Grace's qualities and who, like her, continue to revitalize the spirit of peace and justice in this world. Like Grace's, Maxine Hong Kingston's work exemplifies a commitment to women's rights, especially those of minority women. Everybody still hear me? Oh, her book, The Woman Warrior, has been reported by the Modern Language Association as the most commonly taught text in modern university education. It has been used in disciplines as far-reaching as American literature, anthropology, Asian studies, composition, education, psychology, sociology, and women's studies. In 1997, President Bill Clinton awarded her the National Humanities Medal. Her commitment to the cause of peace could not be better illustrated than the fact that she was arrested in 2003 in Washington, D.C. for crossing a police barrier during one of the massive protests held literally all over the planet that year. In April 2007, Hong Kingston was awarded the Northern California Book Award, Special Award in Publishing for Veterans of War, Veterans of Peace, an anthology which she edited. And I'd just like to note two comments made about that book. This from a veteran. I attended some of Maxine Hong Kingston's Veterans Writing Group in Northern California some years ago, and I have fond memories of our walking meditation and the group's writing, which brings me to this collection of some of the most healing words I've experienced. Veteran of War, Veteran of Peace. This is one of the most beautiful and healing books I have ever seen. And as a Vietnam veteran and ex-clinical social worker for the Department of Veterans Affairs, I have read my share. This book has soul and is very real and relevant. And finally, this from a daughter of a veteran. I've often wished for what Veterans of War, Veterans of Peace offers, honest and eloquent testimonies of war's myriad sorrows and transformations, in order to guide my own healing as a daughter of the war in Vietnam. I am stunned by these 80 brave and beautifully written offerings from combat soldiers, medics, conscientious objectors, and family members of war. Their collective wisdom is a triumph for the power of witness. So please, let's welcome Maxine Hong Kingston.
I just remembered to turn off my own cell phone, so I want to remind you too. It is really a fine and wonderful thing that we have memorials to Grace Paley very often, because when we remember her, it helps us to know how we are going to carry on without her. How are we going to carry on the peacemaking and the pacifism in continuous war? So I'm going to begin by reading you a scene in which Grace Paley appears as a character. This is in my book, The Fifth Book of Peace, and it is about the early years when we began the Veteran Writers Workshop in California. And I invited Grace to come and help me teach it. And I had many motives. One of them was that I was very nervous and shy about conducting a meeting, a workshop for veterans when I myself am not a veteran, and so my authority was just that I am a creative writing teacher, and my other authority was that I would teach meditation in the Vietnamese tradition. And I did not come out openly and say that I am a pacifist or that I was in any anti-war demonstrations. I just kind of didn't say anything about it. I kept it hidden. But then Grace, she is well known for doing all those things, and then she could lead it, and in a way she could draw their fire. People were still angry at the peace demonstrators, and so here she is. We are getting ready for Grace to come, and she is, I gotta tell you one character that I'm going to mention in this scene, and this character is called Woman Vet. I mean, that's the name, that's her name. Actually, she is a composite of quite a few women veterans, and I was surprised at how angry the women vets were. They came into the workshop demanding their right to be recognized as veterans. A lot of them were civilians that served in the war, and so they also wanted the right to be called a veteran, even though you were not in a military uniform. A lot of them were donut dollies, even CIA, they were also, they wanted to be called veterans. I'm surprised at their anger, but even more surprised at their humbleness. When I wanted to write about them, I asked permission, and they said no, they did not want their names. But then I said, what if I just gave you one name? I'll just call you Woman Vet. Is that okay? And then that was okay. And so there are several people who are will be called Woman Vet. Preparing for Grace Paley's visit, most people haven't heard of her. I read aloud her prose poem about a boy who shot off his trigger finger. He had used it to point accusingly at guilty persons, for target shooting, for filing alphabetically. None of these actions concerned him anymore. To help him make general love, he still had his whole hand, and for delicate love, his middle finger. Therefore, he joyfully married and fathered several children. All of them had shot off index fingers, as did their children. That family became a peaceful race apart. Sickness and famine didn't devastate them. Out of human curiosity, they traveled, and they were stubborn and tough like the feathery seeds of trees that flowed over mountain barriers and railroad valleys. In far places, the children of the man with a shot-off index finger gathered into settlements and cities, and of course, they grew and multiplied. And that's how, at last, if you can believe it, after the dead loss of 1 million dead generations on the round river streaked face of the earth, war ended. I also read the poem with the line, "It is the responsibility of the poet to be a woman. Woman vet and all the women love it. Pauline borrows a photocopier and makes copies for one and all. Men ask, what does this mean? It is the responsibility of the poet to be a woman." I tell about Grace's being in country during the war. She was inside the tunnels in Quang Binh, the land of fire. The peace movement had negotiated the release of POWs, 3 bomber pilots, and Grace went to Hanoi to receive them and escort them home. One of the bomber pilots, mulling over what job he could get as a civilian, perplexed her. "To be truthful," he said, "I really liked bombing." Lee Swenson, friends with Grace since the nonviolent resistance days, is driving her from San Jose. He made leaflets for us with quotes and pictures. There's a photo of Grace wearing a knit cap, a smile, and words on a pillowcase poncho over her down jacket. Money, arms, war, profit, Wall Street. She's so cute. She'll disarm the vets, surely. She'll love them and call them dear, and they'll love her back. A myth about her is that she calmed a police horse and kept him from charging into the crowd. Lee said, how could they not be won over by this small person with white hair? Not older, but old. An elder is coming to teach us. When Grace arrives, people are very eager to read, hands and faces and bodies tensely signaling to go next. I nod to Jean Watson. She reads about working as a nurse in a burned-out village, in burned-out villages. Some children remained alive. Women pick up the pieces, waist, hip in blood. It was our job to fix the wounded, help them return to battle to kill again. Women follow the soldiers and the war. I was sisters with the Vietnamese women selling sex to the soldiers. Now working for peace is my obsession. Women transmute war. Ted Sexauer squares himself, ready to confront the peace activists, and reads, Dear Ms. Paley, you might not remember me. We met before at the War Memorial in San Francisco. This is the 25th year of my PTSD. He holds up a book, Paradise of the Blind by Duong Thu Huang. On the back is a blurb, critical of acclaimed by Grace Paley. We have been learning for many years from Americans who seem to consider the Vietnamese experience, life, and war their own. At last, a Vietnamese woman, tells us Vietnamese life. Tough Teddy calls upon Grace to answer for her use of the adjective Vietnamese. To call the war the Vietnamese experience is an error, he says. We call it the Vietnam experience. Vietnam was our experience too. I've just been back to Vietnam, paid for by my 100% disability money. I heard the Vietnamese call it the American War. don't sound very sympathetic to us. Are you tired of us? The room is tense, upset. Ted is angry at Grace. Who is she anyway? Is Maxine trying to foist Jane Fonda off on us? I say to Grace, it's okay to wait until everyone has read, or she could answer now. She says, I'm a teacher. I've taught school. Let's wait till I hear from everybody. I've never seen her look so tired. Maybe jet lag. Woman vet lets loose wrath at Grace. And hippies from Berserkly, cowardly stay-at-homes, hypocrites, partying while servicemen and servicewomen were risking their lives. I was against the war, and I went to Vietnam. Responsibilities and patriotism moved me. 23 years later, hippies are yuppies, greedy for Gulf oil. When Woman Vet was in Vietnam, her sister was in the demonstrations at Humboldt State. We're friends now, as long as we don't talk about that Vietnam time. Rich Gilman sees Grace as I do. You look like my mother, he says. Grace says, you look like my son. He reads to her about enlisting. The recruiter came to his high school and gave a high-making speech about being one with God. Rich was 14 years old, 3.5 years away from graduation. You couldn't even take the GED until 19. I aced the Air Force exam, got all the questions right. The recruiter wanted me so badly, he lied for me about my age. Rich was a rock ape in a weird little war. We bombed the rice paddies of China. Our planes flew out from Taiwan 6 days a week. Under cover of the Vietnam War, our country attacked and provoked China. Reading to Grace, Pauline weeps. I am a third-generation widow. He didn't come home for dinner. The Army trained the married man to leave the wife behind. If the Army wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. Her listeners inhale audibly. John Swenson, West Point graduate, officer, writes 2 letters to Grace. 1966, Dear anti-war bitch. As if he has thrown a grenade into the middle of the table, the group shrinks back away from the bang. Oh no. I brought Grace here to be adored. For the people I love to love one another. I've sandbagged her. John rants against the cowards who stayed home. He calls names until he gets embarrassed and stops. His other letter, dated 1969, begins, Dear Grace, we're making mistakes. Officers were admitting to friends, fellow trusted officers, their doubts about Vietnam. We're doing illegal things, committing crimes. Our pilots are breaking the law. They're ordered not to teach the Vietnamese to fly the planes, but disobey as soon as they get in country. The laws and orders don't mean nothing. Jack Noble writes about the common soldiers trying to get out of the war. My first exposure to peace came among the grunts. The order, search and destroy, became search and avoid. A grunt went out in the jungle and stabbed himself with a punji stick. Another grunt got his wife to file for divorce so he could go home on emergency leave. Grunt said when they got home, they were going to strangle the first long hair that they came across, yet let their hair grow longer than the regulation ½ an inch. I saw pictures in Stars and Stripes of the Democratic Party convention and riot in Chicago and wanted to fight harder for my country. On his way home from Nam, Jack called his parents, and his younger brother answered the phone. "What are you doing home?" asked Jack. "I'm going over in 17 days, his brother said. He was on his way to Vietnam. It was a catharsis point for me. I can still hear it, my younger brother's voice. "I'm going over in 17 days. That was when I knew something was not right. I had done all that was necessary, all that I could for my country, everything my country asked of me. My mother had a nervous breakdown with me gone, and now she has to send another one, and 4 brothers behind me. I had the concept that every family had an obligation, and I fulfilled it for my family. What's going on? War stunk. I was ready to tear people apart." When Jack came home, he joined the peace movement. Eric Schwartz, who looks too grunge hippie to be a computer worker at Bank of America, riffs on the stink of the Nam. "I have the stink of the Nam on my body," Grunts used to say. "I can smell a gooner a mile away." Eric sums up his life. Vietnam vet, a breed apart. The people who've been there call out the smells of Vietnam. Piss tubes, shit burning in kerosene, diesel, aviation fuel, insect repellent, gunpowder, water buffalo, napalm, napalmed flesh, fear, oilskin body bags, the Arvin who could turn out to be enemy, beetle nut, sweat, terror, rat infestation, tobacco, marijuana, candles, foods, knock nam, nook nam, nam down, nook chum, whores, tigers, crocodilators, incense, farts, feet, anger, the desire to kill, Agent Orange, which did not smell like oranges. It was a horrible, indescribable smell. Your nose and lungs shrivel against taking it in. Dead smell, metallic dead earth. There was a pollen that dusted everything, but it might not have been pollen. It might have been poison. I ask, so what is the smell of a Vietnamese person? Grace says, cilantro. They smell like cilantro. You know, actually, my editor helped me take something out here. I asked, what does a Vietnamese person smell like? And they said those names like Nuc Nam, which is fish sauce. And my editor said, do you really want that in there? That they are saying that they smell like stinky fish sauce? And Grace, you know, she comes in with a good smell, the smell of cilantro. And whereas they were saying fish sauce, but my editor said, why don't you just leave the cilantro? Just take out the fish sauce. And so I did. But now that I think about it, I should have left it in. Because, you know, I mean, growing up Chinese, we like the smell of fish sauce. But I think they didn't mean it that way. Grace tells the group that that she takes up her ordinary responsibilities as parent and citizen. You know, PTA meetings, neighborhood duties, school board stuff. Her local womanly group holds ceremonies thanking the school board for various bonds and ordinances. Showing up for the Thetford Town Council meetings, that is political activism, and naturally connects you up with a wider world, civil rights, war, and peace. In 1961, she says, very early on, people got wind of a war very far away. Oh, come on, that's not happening. Can't be. Our vigil added on wider concerns. We weren't against you. We were trying to bring you home. Grace was raised in army camps. Her father was in World War II, as were both her husbands. They came back damaged, crazy. My husband came home from Germany, fine for the first week, then lay down on the couch and turned his back on everything. That's what my brother, this is me talking, that's what my brother Joe did for a year on our parents' sofa. Now this is Grace talking. He wouldn't talk, and I thought, what's wrong with me? That he doesn't love me anymore? Wars are like that. She's addressing the non-vet, a breed apart. She is saying, you are not different from the soldiers of the good war. You are not a breed apart. Outside, the storm is gusting. Inside, there are outbursts of excitement and stillness. People make statements, then contradict their own statements. They argue in one direction, then the opposite. They are giving up their specialness, defending it hard, then letting it go, becoming ordinary. It is a Buddhist ideal to be ordinary. Mid-sentence, tones of voice change from cynical to idealistic. No such thing as a good war. We lost. Good thing we lost. What kind of people would we have become if we'd won? We won. It continues to rain until floods cover Northern California. Okay, now this group has met with Grace and meeting with me. We are an ongoing group. We're getting ready to celebrate. We're planning our 20th anniversary coming up and thinking of what are we going to do, where are we going to go to celebrate our 20th. And these veterans from, there were a lot of wars that were here, mostly Vietnam vets, but Israel, the Dominican Republic, gang wars in the street. There were gang members who joined. Korea, and now, having stayed together for 20 years, they're the elders now. They're not only older, but old, and now it's their turn to welcome home the soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan. And they're the new soldiers coming in. It's very hard to try to figure out what to do. I'll just give you one example. There is a woman vet who came to the group, and she admitted to having PTSD, and she came to write with us. But then the next thing we know, she was pregnant, and she had a baby, and a single mother, and And at this very moment, she is homeless with a baby, and